Almost 2:30 here on this Thursday. Now, you never know where life's path might take you, and our next guest knows that all too well. He's worked in marketing for years, but recently added children's book author to his resume.
Today, we are joined by Casey Maxwell, author of The Boy with Horns. Now, this all started, I love the backstory. It all started with kind of a little make-believe story time with your son. Talk about the background.
Yeah, so my son, you know, every time you're putting a kid to bed, you have a routine. I want to read a story, let's pray, let's put you to bed, let's turn out the light and talk for a little bit, and then I can leave, right? But my son had a set of techniques to keep me in the room longer, right? He didn't want to go to sleep. So one of his best tactics was, tell me a story, Dad. And so one night he asked me to tell a story, and honestly, what I would try and do in these stories is I would try and tell a story about a boy, because then he could identify with that character, right? And say, oh, I'm like that kid. And so then he could, but most of my stories were terrible. They had no plot, the character development was terrible, and they would end in some like explosion, or it was just a dream, or some terrible ending. And so one night he pulls this, can you tell me a story, Dad? And I came up with this premise, which I have no idea where it came from. But I was like, a boy goes to sleep and wakes up one morning, and he's grown horns overnight, but nobody else can see them except for him. And so there was something about that premise of the story that I just absolutely loved. And so the whole time I'm telling him the story, I'm like, okay, he's got to find someone at the end that can see the horns, right? So we go through this whole story. I land the plane, and there's this silence. And he goes, that was a pretty good story, Dad. Right? And I didn't take offense. I didn't take offense because most of my stories were terrible. But I was like, yeah, that is a good story. And so he asked me the next night, and the next night, and the next night to tell it again and again. And so I refined the story over time, but it wasn't until I wrote it down that I realized that it was talking about a much bigger theme than I had originally intended.
I love, and that's what's so interesting about this. There is a deeper meaning to it. It opens conversations. Tell us about that aspect.
Yeah, so the story is about the things in life that people can't see that happens on the inside of us that make us feel alone.
Yeah.
No matter if you're 10 or if you're 40, like there is stuff that you deal with on the inside that makes you feel alone, right? And what you do a lot of times is you just try and handle it by yourself, right? Or the times that you ask other people and they don't understand what you're talking about, right? And so then you're like, ooh, that was a bad idea. I shouldn't have brought that up. And so then you internalize it again, and what that it festers. It just gets worse, and it makes you feel scared, right?
Yeah.
And so the message of this book is, we're all dealing with that stuff. We all have horns, but the goal is talk to someone else, right? I really hope that this book becomes a bridge between parents and their kids to take this like big concept of things that makes us feel alone, things that makes us feel scary, you know, things that are scary, and allows parents to go, what do you think the horns represented? Wow. Do you feel alone? Like, what are the things that happen with you?
What are your horns?
What are your horns, right?
Yeah.
And allows that dialogue to happen.
Yeah. Oh, it's amazing. Thank you so much. You also illustrated it. It's beautiful. You did a great job.
Thank you.
And I know you've already heard from parents that say it's opening doors for their conversation. So thank you.
Yeah,
yes,
thank
incredible. You. All right, well, you can read more about The Boy with Horns online and pick up this book, and it's available on Amazon.